All right, guys, we are on location this week, and joining me, I'm going to look down here because he's got a great bio here, is a former design ethicist at Google who now leads Time Well Spent, which is a really great organization trying to figure out how do we decouple the madness of the internet and our brain. You can use that line if you want. Tristan Harris, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this
because
although we're going to do a little politics, that's really not what we're doing here. We're going to be talking about, I went into my pocket to find my phone, they took it from me. Thank God they took it from me so that we can actually have a conversation for an hour. You're basically talking about the way that our phones and technology and the algorithms and the constant social media onslaught and all of this stuff is changing us.
Yeah.
Is that a fair estimation to kick this thing off?
Yeah. Well, I spent, before leaving Google, I spent about 3.5 years studying design ethics, which is really, there was really no field for it, but it's basically how do you ethically steer what 1 billion people are going to think, feel, and do if you are in the control room at a big tech company like Facebook mostly, but also Google and Apple in shaping the home screens and the notifications of what will be the constraints of how 1 billion people's lives are steered today.
Yeah, so design ethicists, so that's the physical stuff mostly, right? So that's not, we're going to get into some of the sort of mental stuff and push notifications and how all that stuff affects us. But at first, this was really about like the physical portion of it.
Actually, no, more the screen. So more the way that, if Facebook puts a variable schedule reward, like the little red notification thing, what's the ethics of that?
Yeah.
Because
well, I mean like the physical locations of things and things like that, more than just the way that the information is just slamming us all the time.
Oh, totally, yeah. But really the full stack of it. I think there's just this whole, we are persuadable at every single level, from the attentional level to the trust level to the belief level.
Yeah.
And so how do you ethically steer the phenomenology of someone?
Yeah. So how do we? How do we do that? Like, so you guys sit down, you get this job. What are you looking at? Are you looking at a phone at first? Like, how does it all go?
Well, so at the time, I was on the Gmail team, and I was interested in, first of all, that as you're designing the next version of Gmail, it became Inbox. A lot of people have Inbox now. How do you, for example, decide should you buzz people's pockets when they get a new email? So it's like a seemingly trivial decision, but whether you decide one way or the other, like dinner conversations and families will either be disrupted or not, and someone will glance and then see it and then get sucked in or not, all because of this one decision in California with a handful of people in a room.
Right. So how does that go down? How does that discussion even happen?
Well, so at the time I wasn't a design ethicist. I was just working on Gmail with that team. And I got really interested in the way that people were talking in that meeting, which was more about the engagement of the app. How do we build a successful app that's delightful to use, that people like to use? And none of it was kind of anchored on how do we know whether or not this is actually a net positive experience at all in people's lives, right? Like you take a step back and you ask, when is email actually making life better?
Right.
Like this sort of the deeper underlying, like if you didn't have email at all, would your life be worse, or would it just be would it be a lot better? So instead of saying,
I'll save my answer for that to the end. I'll give all my feelings on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, because this started for me having my own questions about, being bombarded in a big company with just email onslaught every day and Google Calendar invites. And you just kind of ask, like, man, when are we actually doing work? Like, when am I getting emails or responding to things that lead to something? When is this action? Versus when is this just filling up our lives with noise? And it's really subtle to ask, like, where are those net positive to life? And so it started off just with my own kind of frustration with technology and email, and then realizing that conversation with this team of people who was going to influence what 100 million knowledge workers do. A lot of people, live their whole day inside of email. Like, that's like what they do. That the Gmail box is just there. Yeah. And they live there. Like, that's where their attention is, like, they're living inside of. And so I made this presentation at Google called A Call to Minimize Distraction and Respect People's Attention. And it was sort of a manifesto as I was planning to leave, and it ended up going viral to thousands and thousands of people at Google. And I ended up sort of in this self-titled role of how do you ethically design stuff.
Yeah. So you're planning to leave, you do this, it takes off, and then it was sort of like a relief to people, because did you sense that a lot of people were feeling this? I've been talking about this on and off for about 2 years, about my exhaustion with some of this stuff and why I need to shut down and not look at my feed all the time and all this stuff. And you'd probably be happy to know that I try twice a year for a week to lock my phone in a safe and not do anything. I try is the opposite, is the operative word.
Yeah.
But once you sort of went public with this, did you find that there was like just this massive need for it?
Well, first was just in Google, because this presentation was only within Google, and it was more talking to the designers about our responsibility in shaping other people's attention and whether they were stressed out. So their response was pretty remarkable. I mean, I sent it to only about 10 people for feedback, and the next day when I came to work, I had 15 emails, and when I clicked on the presentation, it shows you the number of people looking at it at once, and there was 150 simultaneous Googlers looking at it at the same time. So I knew it had started spreading virally, and when I went to the bus the next day, there was like 500 people. So it struck a chord within Google, and I think it struck a chord in a way that people knew was a problem in their own lives, but I think it had not been brought up that we were responsible, because really, there's this whole narrative that it's up to us to choose how we use technology and how many emails we send and what we post on Facebook. And I was really challenging that.
Yeah. How does a company like Google feel about having that challenged?
Well, I think that it's interesting because throughout Silicon Valley in general, it's a totally libertarian culture that from the top down, people made their millions by their own self-will and their own success of the companies, and therefore it's always people's individual responsibility with how they use everything. But what this missed was that in the race for attention, every single app or media site or news site or podcast is competing for attention. And the best way to do that is to actually play these sort of magic tricks on people's minds and to manipulate them so you can get as much attention as possible.
Yeah.
And that element is where the responsibility lies.
Yeah, it's interesting you said magic trick, because you used to be into magic as a kid, right? So you sort of knew what some of these tricks are. So what are some of the tricks that are keeping us looking at these things all day?
The main one I say all the time is just that your phone is basically a slot machine, because every single time you check it, you either got invited to do the Rubin Report or you just get another newsletter.
We were going to send you a regular mail something, but it seemed, not very 2017.
Yeah, right. But it's because of the fact that when you turn your phone over, it could be a match on Tinder with that hot whatever that you want to date. It could be the email that's really exciting. It could be the text message from that person you really wanted to text you. Or it could just be nothing.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like a slot machine. Every single time you turn it over, you're playing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you get good stuff, sometimes you don't. Trump's kind of like a negative slot machine where you play and be like, what happened in the world today? So you're like, damage report kind of.
Yeah. How much of that is making us crazy, do you think? Because I've noticed just in the last couple weeks, I've been traveling a lot. And when you're sitting next to someone on a plane, you sort of end up looking at what they're doing, no matter, just even if you're not trying to, you end up seeing a little sign, whether it's reading the paper or whatever. But I've noticed a lot of times people are on Facebook just scrolling.
Right.
And their feeds are completely insane.
Yeah.
You see a picture of a baby, then you see Trump might start war with North Korea.
Right.
Then you see a cat video, and then you see a baseball game, and it's like this can't be right for our brains.
No.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, on so many levels. I mean, Neil Postman was actually the best sort of thinker on these topics. He wrote a book in 1982 called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Did you know his?
I know of the book.
Yeah. I mean, just really how media. But what does it do to a human being, like the human animal, social animal, to sort of stick these one at a time, off totally unrelated sound bites? And he was talking about in TV when there's the sort of now this and now this on TV, where you go from the car accident in your local town to North Korea, and then and now this, and here's like a little clown dancing or something in a funny way.
Right.
And just what that does to people taking seriously something.
Right. Now we're very nostalgic for that. The idea, I don't really watch local news, but the idea of just basic local news seems pretty sane relative to what's going on most people's feeds these days.
Yeah, exactly. It's all over the place. I think it's driving people crazy.
Yeah. So what do we do? What do we do? What have you found that we can do to uncouple some of this stuff from making us nuts?
Well, I mean, one is what I try to do is go out there and clarify what exactly is the problem.
Yeah.
So what people miss is we always think like technology is just this tool and we could use it in any way, and it's evolving in this sort of open-ended way. We could have VR and augmented reality and look at all these amazing possibilities it could be. And I actually want to say like that is not true. We know exactly where this is going. And the reason we know exactly where it's going is because every technology company and every app and every news website and every whatever has to compete for attention. Can you be a politician and not get attention to win an election? No. Can you be a podcast and not get attention to be successful? No. Everyone, even a meditation app, has to get your attention.
Right.
And so you just think of the city, and we only have so much. It's a zero-sum game. So if I spend it like editing typos on my last Facebook post and like saying I gotta make sure I fix those, I'm not spending it with my friend, or I'm not reading the news, or I'm not seeing the cat photos. So we have to ask this question of what is worthy of our attention? What's worthy of our time? That's where the phrase "time well spent" comes from.
Yeah.
And so that means if you're a technology designer, what stuff do you put into this limited time block you're inserting into someone's life? Like what should be there? Because they're not going to choose. They see themselves choosing, but they're choosing from a menu that you set up in the first place.
Right. So as you said, though, since Silicon Valley is a pretty libertarian place where everyone's trying to figure out the next mousetrap and all that, isn't scaling back some of this stuff, while it might be mentally healthy, I'll take might out, while I'm sure it's mentally healthy for all of us, it's sort of counterintuitive to how these businesses operate, right?
Yeah. They need you to use it as much as possible. And not because there's anyone evil there, right? Just as a classic, like, they make more money the more time you're on the feed.
Yeah.
And
there might be someone evil there, but that's not the general.
Some of them do go to lower. I call this the race to the bottom of the brainstem. And the question is, if you go really low on the brainstem, it can be kind of evil. Snapchat does a couple things that are really
so
bad.
what's something like that? Because I do think that sort of tiered thing is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is really interesting because if you say there's like a Geneva Convention of persuasion, and saying, well, how low on the brainstem should we be allowed to go? So one thing that Snapchat does particularly, and I find this particularly concerning because the number one use case or demographic is teenagers who use Snapchat and kids. So there's a persuasive technique where if you put people into a reciprocity relationship where they kind of owe each other something. So if your friend says happy birthday to you, you have to say, oh, thank you so much, right? But if you were able to be like a puppet master above two people and tap this one on the shoulder and get them to say happy birthday to this person, and every single time they had to respond to happy birthday, they'd have to go back into Facebook, then you're sitting there causing all these people to do all these things and run around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Yeah.
And it might be beneficial, but it also might be manipulative. So what Snapchat does is they invented a feature called Streaks that shows the number of days in a row that you've sent a message back and forth. And so if you're a kid, you have like 30 of these things going. And so like, for example, it'll say you have 150 days going with this friend. And what they just did is they invented something that now these two kids don't want to lose. And so it's not even that they're having real conversations with each other. They're going, just to make it through their day, they have to send a message of a photo or a wall or anything just to sort of tap the other friend in the shoulder, and then they have to send a message back.
Yeah.
And kids, when they go on vacation, they give their password to 5 other friends to make sure they don't lose their streak. So all of this is getting sort of added to the scheduling little blocks of time in kids' minds and in their lives, and it's not done because it's helping them live their life. It's done because it's really good at getting you to stay and addicted to the app.
Right. So if you were sitting down with the Snapchat people, and they heard you say this, I suspect they would basically be like, "Yeah, we just want engagement, and we don't deny what you're saying is what we're doing." Maybe they'd subtly deny it or something. But
it'd actually be really. I'm really interested in denial. I spent the whole summer studying denial, actually, and I think there's so many different excuses, right? Like one is, well, if we don't do it, someone else will. Another one is, well, people like it. I'm sure there's like some story somewhere in the world where 2 kids had some like really hilarious, life-changing, positive experience because of streaks. Like that anecdote exists somewhere.
Right.
But the question is, for each of these things, like. Yeah, I think there isn't enough of an ethics conversation about these things. And actually, what I found in my work is there is no understanding of what ethical persuasion is. It's a very, very deep, like multifaceted. There's a lot of different moral variables inside of what would be an ethical or unethical persuasive transaction.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some ethical transactions then. So would you say that's unethical what they're doing? By the definitions of what you would say is ethical, is that sort of low-hanging fruit, just keep them doing nonsense? Would you say that is unethical in and of itself?
I would say that specific design technique with that audience is not okay. And
Yeah.
the reason is because so here's another defense I would use if I were Snapchat.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's just a product. You can choose to use the product, or you can not use the product.
Right.
You know, or you could say, you know, if you're having trouble with it, like it's just a number. Like, just ignore the number. It's not like we're forcing you to do anything.
Right.
But what this misses is, of course, that we are persuadable. Like, we don't walk around with that. The libertarian instinct is we don't walk around with an idea that people can like pull on a little part of our mind, right? But when you have that number there, and especially there's this woman, Emily Weinstein at Harvard, who studied all of this, and that's where this research comes from. She found specifically with like the developmentally challenged kids, or like the ones who are younger, still figuring out their self-worth and identity, that they're the ones most prone to needing to keep up these streaks because they feel like their friendship is tied up in whether or not they continue it. So one thing that makes this unethical is that because Snapchat is the #1 predominant way for these kids to communicate, this is like for you and I what text messaging is.
Right.
So imagine like built into opening your mouth to talk to anybody is this manipulative techniques. You can't open your mouth without being exposed to this persuasive draw.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like it's building it too close to a core dimension of communication.
Right.
So that's one aspect. Second is the developmental one, that they're young. They don't know this is happening. The goals of the persuaders are not transparent to the persuadees. There's a whole long list of dimensions of what makes it okay or not.
Right. So before we get into the ethical part, I would imagine some people would hear this and say, well, you know what? This is the parents' fault. You can't stop the companies, right? If you're going on the libertarian route, you can't stop the companies from doing it.
Right.
And they're putting all these things. No one's forcing you to do it. Like, I can buy all that stuff. The libertarian side of me can fully buy all that stuff.
Right.
But, I see all the time now, 3-year-old kids at restaurants, iPad. They can't even talk yet. They don't even realize what's real and not real. So some of it you would just say is just a parental thing, right? Like, that's just a piece of this too, right?
Well, I mean, absolutely. There has to be a question about how early do you expose kids to screens, and that's a question that parents have. But I mean, this is for Snapchat. It's a lot of teenagers, and their social identity and their social opportunities, their sexual opportunities, all of that stuff is wrapped up inside of one medium. Because if that's the dominant way that everybody else is talking, and they're not talking in any other medium, like, you can't talk to them. You can't be included. So it's like if the only way to get invited to the party is to be on Snapchat, that's the trade I would have to make. And that's what makes it kind of like a cult. Like, I've studied cults quite a bit, and cults are interesting because they persuade not just the individual, but your sort of social bindings with everybody else.
Yeah. So so that was sort of a low-grade one that's happening, that you could question the ethicity? Is that a word?
The ethics of.
The ethics of? Yeah, okay. The ethics of. What are some sort of mid-level ones that maybe aren't so low-hanging fruit that are out there?
Well, like, variable schedule rewards. So variable schedule rewards is that slot machine mechanic, right? So, like, is that so bad? Well, I mean, what it does is the more I expose you to, you pull a lever, and sometimes you have, you go to Twitter and you load Twitter, and there's like a 5-second delay where it puts the number of new notifications you have. I'm assuming you use Twitter.
I've been on there once or twice.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of what's going on over there. No, I love Twitter.
Right.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I love Twitter. It's
Right.
where I've built so much of my audience. I love interacting with people on there.
Right.
But I've grown it to a point where now it's like it's just such a cacophony of insanity on there. And suddenly I could get 100 positive things and they mean nothing. And then one person is like, "Fuck you, Rubin." And then of course that's the one that I pay attention to.
Yeah, right.
Which probably has a lot to do with the way they've designed this thing.
Yeah, well, so that's what's so tricky also about these things is in talking about or criticizing the manipulative aspects, it's not like we don't derive benefit from these services, or they unleashed a whole new amazing new social relationships, or people meeting each other they would have never met. That's all great. The question is, could you get to similar places of benefits while cutting out all the bad stuff?
Yeah.
But take this example of Twitter. So if they have this slot machine-like thing where when you load the page, it doesn't just show you immediately the number. It shows you after this extra delay. You'll notice you load the page and there's like a couple extra seconds, and then the number goes up like that. And that delay is what makes it a little bit more addictive. So what it's doing is it's talking to a totally unconscious part of your mind and inserting essentially a habit, which like now you're going to feel compelled to want to check it again, like on your next break, basically, because you're playing that machine. So what could they do differently? Well, they could actually say, what would be time well spent for you using Twitter? And you'd be like, look, I just want to know, like once a week, like the most important people who didn't just retweet stuff that I've done, but who said something to me, and the people who have more than like, I don't know, 5,000 followers or something like that. That might be time well spent. And so you could imagine there's a version of Twitter that'd be very easy for them to do that, where it doesn't show you between now and then all of these sort of variable rewards. It just delivers at the end of the week this one batch. And so that makes it less addictive, but also still delivers all the benefits. And so that creates a timeline that would be, instead of like 6 choppy uses of it, you get one big organized use of it. So I think of this kind of like rearranging the urban plan of a city, but it's the city's the attention economy.
So what's their incentive to do that? If basically we know that, you know, when they're selling ads or whatever, however else they're making money and they're looking at shareholders and all that, and they're not doing that well, Twitter obviously. But like, what's their incentive when they just want you on there? Or is there no incentive and you're just trying to flat out just be like, this is how time well spent should be spent?
So there's no incentive for them to change this. That's exactly the problem. Is it's this race to the bottom that's not competing for like what we would want Twitter to be competing for, which is the benefit that it delivers in our lives. It's competing for whatever the next microdose of like attention it can kind of pull from you. I think of this like so I mean, they're not going to change until their business model is not advertising. So one of the things, and I said this on Sam's podcast too, is we have to be able to decouple the relationship between more of the time I steal from you equals more money I make. And this is actually not different from what happened in energy utilities, where at first they make more money the more energy you use. So like, you know, just like I actually have an incentive to like go into your house and like flip all the faucets on and leave the lights on and like not tell you to turn anything off and to waste as much energy as possible. That'd be good for me as an energy company. But then that was a perverse incentive, so they established this utility commission board that basically sets targets that disincentivizes you from using more energy. It makes when you go beyond a certain tier, it's more expensive. And then they don't actually get that money. It gets reinvested into more renewable energy programs. So what if like technology companies work similarly, where up to a certain point, they make more money the more use they get. But beyond a certain point, it's decoupled. It's not, they don't make more money. And all that extra money gets pulled directly into sort of social good projects. Like imagine fighting fake news or cyberbullying. All that can get resourced in a deliberate way.
So I like the concept behind that, but do you think that has to be done by the government? So like when you think about it in the context of, you know, electricity or water or power, I've hit that tier once or twice on water when I've had a lot of people, you know, over, or on gas or electricity or whatever. And then you see, oh wow, I went up, and then my bill actually really increased because of that. It could be a moot point to you whether it's going to renewable energy or just to the company or whatever. But would you need the government to set standards on that for a town that, as you said, is pretty libertarian?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what's tricky about this. I can't remember with energy utilities when this happened, how much of this was an opt-in by all of the utility companies together. So sometimes this can happen by everybody collectively realizing there's a problem, that the threat of regulation is coming from government, and they can get ahead of it by creating their own management board. In this case, utilities are also partially publicly owned. It gets more complicated. I think there's a huge question about governance here, that tech companies have one goal, which is to maximize shareholder value, and their shareholder value is tied to maximizing how much attention from your life that they take. So that by itself obviously would need to be changed in some way for us to live in a healthier world.